He found the retrievement wall at the base of the tell that had reinforced it. He found the fallen brick outside that retrievement wall that formed basically a ramp going up toward the city. Here are some of those fallen brick where we were just a few months ago. This is the diagram that Bryant Wood made showing the fallen brick making virtually a ramp going up the retaining wall toward the tell, and this is the way they conquered the city. One of the most amazing things that he found, just made chills go up and down my spine as I looked at it. There was one portion of the wall that was still remaining. The whole wall didn't fall. There was one, you remember there was a promise that was made to one whose house was on the wall that it would be preserved. And we look at that one portion that is left and we see the house. I think I know who lived there. Joshua chapter 2, she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall, so that she was living on the wall. And she was promised that her house would be preserved. The only portion that's left. Well, I find that thrilling. We move from there to consider the story of the prophet Balaam. This has been one of the favorite objects of ridicule of the atheist. After all, he's got a talking donkey. Who in the world can believe that? And of course, that story is preserved for us in Numbers. He was working with the Moabites, the Ammonites, the enemies of the children of Israel, as at the time of the Exodus they were marching toward the Promised Land and were mowing down the people one after another, and we see what they did to this group and to that group, and the Moabites were afraid they would be conquered, and so they hired him a prophet to curse the children of Israel, Balaam. At Tel Der Allah, and the tell is a term for the mounds on which the cities were built. Usually they had been destroyed several times, and a mound was the accumulation of the destruction. They would build the next city on top of it, and we find that all over Israel and in the area. But here is the Tel Der Allah. This is on the other side of the Jordan, as the Jabbok River meets the Jordan. And that was excavated just a few years ago. And in this Tel, they found what was actually an administration building for the Amorites. This is not the Israelites. This is the enemies of the Israelites. And it was covered with plaster that had fallen off. But on that plaster, they had written various stories. And down at the base of the wall, you see the broken plaster that they then could put together, written on with black and red ink. And so, like a jigsaw puzzle, they put this back together to see what the Amorites had to say. And there were a number of administrative details that they had, but as they put that together, they found, of all things, the story of Balaam the prophet. Again, not written by the Israelites, but by the enemies. And here is one line which says, "Warnings given by Balaam, the son of Behor, a seer of the gods." Now this is from the 8th century BC, a story of Balaam the prophet by the enemies of God. Numbers 22 says, "So he sent messengers to Balaam, the son of Behor, at Prethor," which is near the river. They saw what Israel had done to the Amorites, and here's what the Amorites had to say about it. And of course we continue reading the latter part of the verse. "Behold, a people came out of Egypt." This relates directly to the Exodus, which the archaeologists deny today. And of course relates to what we read in verse 28, "The Lord opened the mouth of the donkey." A crazy story? Well, we have archaeological confirmation of that story and of that prophet from the enemies of the children of Israel. I think that's awesome. This material is now on display in Amman, Jordan, and you can go there and look at it in the museum. Shiloh is the way it's referred to by most of the Israelis. Joshua chapter 18 verse 1 says, the whole congregation of the sons of Israel assembled themselves at Shiloh and set up the tent of the meeting there. This was the first permanent place for the Ark of the Covenant during the period of the Judges, and it stayed there for several hundred years. As you read further, you see pretty specific instructions about where this was, and so you can get obviously very close. And we found a church in the area that was built about 400 years after the time of Christ, the Byzantine period, to commemorate Shiloh, the place where they had parked the tabernacle, if you please. And the floor, a beautiful mosaic floor, happened to match the dimensions of the tabernacle, and so it was thought that this was the spot that had been chosen 400 years after Christ, long after, of course, the actual event, that was on the spot where the tabernacle was. Well, that's not really the case. Just recently, with further excavation on the tell, the northern part of that tell, they found that this was just to, yes, commemorate the spot, but not built on the spot. This is the gate that they found, and that opens the way to the path that leads up to the plateau where the tabernacle actually was. And it's so well confirmed that even the Department of Antiquities there in Israel has put up the plaque saying this, in all probability, is where the tabernacle stood. Up on that plateau that's been newly excavated, we have this stone wall, which was the base. Now, you can't really get the dimensions in this picture. We'll get more in just a moment. But the thing that really nailed this down was they found 4th century BC inscriptions. This is 800 years earlier than this Byzantine church, that clearly identified this as Shiloh. Now, it didn't really say, "Welcome to Shiloh," but it was pretty close. 400 years before the time of Christ. And as we look at the outline here in stone, we see where the tent poles were, the holes in regular intervals that go right on around and were to support the tent, the tabernacle. Looking at this picture, you really need to be 50 feet in the air, which was kind of hard for me to do. But with the line here, you can see the dimensions of the tabernacle, which fit beautifully. This is where the tabernacle was for well over 300 years, and where they worshiped during the period of the Judges. This was the capital of Israel during that period, if you please. This is where the sacrifices and the annual feast took place, where the land was allotted to the tribes, where Eli judged and Hannah prayed and Samuel served, and where Eli fell and died. Actually, it wasn't here at this spot. The text says that when he heard the story of the capture of the ark and of the loss of the battle and the death of his sons, he was at the gate. Well, we found the gate, you recall, that leads to this place. This is where he would have been sitting and where he fell and died. From all of the evidence, it's convincing even the skeptics. One after another, we're finding the inscriptions were found in the last 6 months, so it's just almost every month we're finding new confirmation. The fortified gates of Solomon have been known for half a dozen years, but they're interesting confirmation of what we read in 1 Kings chapter 9. This is the account of the forced labor which King Solomon levied to build the house of the Lord, his own house, the Milo. This is Jerusalem. And then also he built at Hazor and Megiddo and Gezer. Well, of course, Solomon is this fictitious creature like Zeus that the real scholars don't believe in. But what did he do at Hazor and Megiddo and Gezer? Well, you go there and you find these strange-looking gates that guard the city. Very difficult to break through these gates into the city with this kind of fortification. And the places where you find these gates are at Hazor and Megiddo and Gezer. And the pottery that we find associated with the gates is from the time of Solomon. Isn't that a surprise? I think that's exactly what the text describes. That's where Solomon built. One of the most exciting bits of evidence was found a number of years ago, but brand new evidence has been uncovered within the last 2 years. It involved 2 silver amulets from the 7th century BC. They were found in Jerusalem at the place now occupied by St. Andrew's Scottish Presbyterian Church, just south of Old Jerusalem. The first find was made in 1979. Gordon Frantz was the supervisor of this dig, actually under the guidance of the director of Gordon Barkay, who wasn't there when the actual find took place. Judith Hadley is the one who actually found the silver amulet. She was a grad student at Wheaton, and she's now professor at Villanova. But one of her colleagues is laying here in what was a tomb. It's a collapsed tomb. It was over him at the time this was originally built. And